Hi, my name is Hayley Bowman, and I'm a Ph.D. candidate in the Department of History at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I received the Richard E. Greenleaf Visiting Library Scholar Award in 2019, and after a few significant delays in travel due to COVID-19, I am happy to have been able to spend the last 2 weeks here in Albuquerque conducting research at the Center for Southwest Research and Special Collections. I would like to thank the Latin American and Iberian Institute and University of New Mexico libraries for this opportunity, and the staff and administration at the Center for Southwest Research for making my work possible and for helping me find everything I needed along the way. Today, I'm going to talk about my dissertation project more generally and how it intersects with my research at the Center for Southwest Research these past few weeks. I'm going to start by introducing my topic and briefly discussing existing work by other historians on this subject before explaining my interventions and approach in my dissertation. And finally concluding by giving you an idea of how the archives and even the surrounding landscape here in New Mexico has fit into my project. Let's dive in. My dissertation examines early modern Spanish understandings of the world and colonial imagination through a singular figure, Sor Maria de Jesus de Agreda. To give you a little background, the child that would eventually take on the religious name Sor Maria de Jesus was born in 1602 in the village of Agreda, a town in northeastern Spain's province of Soria, located about 60 miles west of Zaragoza. As a child, Maria's relationship to the divine was known by attentive contemporaries to have begun early in her life. When she was 4 years old, she came to the attention of Don Diego de Yepes, Bishop of Tirana and past confessor to King Philip II. The prelate had just completed his service as Teresa of Avila's confessor, and upon meeting Maria, he was suitably impressed to perform the sacrament of confirmation in the faith for her at an age about 3 years younger than usual. Her religious proclivities grew throughout her childhood, encouraged and supported by her deeply religious family. When Maria reached her teenage years, her mother, Catalina Coronel, began to take steps to turn their home into a convent, inspired and directed by a dream vision of the Almighty. In due course, on January 13th, 1820, at the age of 17, Maria Coronel took the religious name Sor Maria de Jesus and became a novice in the Franciscan order, along with her mother and 5 other local women. They dedicated their convent to the Immaculate Conception of Mary, donning the blue habit representing the Virgin Immaculate. Sor Maria became abbess only 8 years later, with special permission from Pope Urban VIII. And this is a picture that I took in Agreda of Sor Maria's childhood home. It's no longer the convent, it's a historical site. It's located actually about a block and a half away from the existing convent. There is still a convent there. I believe there's a handful of nuns in the convent there. And the new site of that convent was one that was selected by Sor Maria, and she initiated the construction, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But this is the original location. As you can see, there's a little plaque, and the Office of Tourism can offer you a tour to the place. You can't go inside, but you can see the outside of her beginnings. At this point, you might be wondering, what does a nun in a rural Spanish village have to do with the landscape and peoples of the American Southwest and colonial New Mexico? That's a good question. To answer this question, we have to take a mystical journey with Sor Maria that involves a miraculous ability called bilocation. Someone who bilocates is reported to be seen in 2 places at one time, sometimes in a trance, a state of ecstasy, or while levitating. In Sor Maria's case, she claimed to have appeared on the frontiers of New Spain in the American Southwest while never leaving her convent cell in Agreda. Like levitation, bilocation was but one physical miracle experienced by the especially faithful throughout the history of Christianity. Saint Ambrose of Milan, Saint Isidore the Laborer, and St. Anthony of Padua are but a few examples of famous Mediterranean saints known in part for their bilocation. Reports of both levitation and bilocation increased in the 17th century, including those surrounding the famous Franciscan flying monk, St. Joseph of Cupertino. During the height of female mysticism in the 16th century in Spain, as epitomized by St. Teresa of Avila, these miracles of suspension increasingly became attributed to women as well as men. Examples began to expand geographically and racially too. The faithful of the New World reported experiences of such miracles, including by those of African, indigenous, and mixed race descent. These included, most famously, Martín de Porres, a bilocating and levitating Peruvian friar of African and Spanish descent, and Francisca de los Angeles, a mestiza of African, indigenous, and Spanish descent from Mexico. That much said, Sor Maria's bilocation, while far from being the only such miracle in her time, has become the most well-known case of a flying nun. There are several factors responsible for this renown and that make her experiences particularly illuminating. First, the large number and frequency of her visions, which reportedly occurred throughout the early 1620s and happened on hundreds of occasions. Second, the destination and mission of her bilocations. While others bilocated from the peninsular Spanish kingdoms to the New World, Sor Maria's abilities to not only appear in the Americas, but also preach to indigenous peoples reveals what I characterize as a missionary mentality, a mindset reflective of larger Franciscan understandings of a world crying out for effective evangelization. Third, the widespread popularity of her story, mobilized most particularly by the work of one Fray Alonso de Benavides, who became Sor Maria's most significant and widely read narrator. But before we can discuss the eventual impact and popularity of her story, we have to talk briefly about what exactly Sor Maria claimed to have happened during her miraculous bilocations. Shortly after taking her religious vows, Sor Maria reported a series of miraculous experiences to her confessors. She explained that beginning in 1620, she had on multiple occasions visited and preached to indigenous peoples on the northern frontier of New Spain and present-day New Mexico and West Texas. The confessors contacted their superiors, initiating a visit from Franciscan Minister General Padre Pedro Manero, who determined that further investigation was warranted. Orders eventually traveled down the Franciscan chain of command to reach Padre Alonso de Benavides, then head of the Franciscan missionary activities in the Kingdom of Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico. He was told to conduct a full investigation into the claims of Sor Maria and her confessors in Agreda. Benavides began his investigation in 1629. Here, Sor Maria's story might begin to sound familiar to some of you, as her involvement in missionary activities and the investigation by Benavides took place predominantly at the Salinas Pueblo missions, located just outside of present-day Mountain Air, New Mexico. Benavides became the custodian of the New Mexican missions in 1626, establishing the San Isidro Church at what is now known as Gran Quivira. He worked as a missionary throughout the area, familiarizing himself with other missionaries and the indigenous people, which Benavides and his Spanish colleagues called the Humanos, as he worked at colonizing and converting these northern borderlands. Following the orders of his superiors, Benavides began his investigation by speaking with a group of Humanos and missionaries at the mission in Isleta, located between Albuquerque and the Salinas Pueblo missions. This became the first in a series of interviews undertaken by Benavides to determine the validity of Sor Maria's claims. He published his findings in Madrid in his Memorial of 1630, which included a chapter about the unusual reports of the appearance of a lady in blue, an unnamed nun wearing the blue habit of the Immaculate Conception, who reportedly preached to the Humanos at Salinas. However, Benavides had yet to officially declare the nun's identity. After submitting his report to the court of King Philip IV, he visited Sor Maria in Agreda with the intention of hearing from the nun herself in order to make his final determination about her claims. He recorded his impressions in a second report written in 1634 for Pope Urban VIII. Sor Maria persuaded me entirely by describing to me all the things in New Mexico as I have seen them myself, as well as by other particularities that I keep in my soul and which remove all doubt. From all of this, I infer certainly that it is Mother Maria who miraculously goes to preach to the nations of New Mexico, such as the Omanos, Quiviras, and other kingdoms that she herself told me about with most evident details. In writing these two memoriales, Benavides not only confirmed Sor Maria's claims, he also became her most enthusiastic promoter and bolstered considerably her position as a profoundly gifted mystic. While the resulting official reports and accounts of her appearances would, in time, reveal several inconsistencies, Sor Maria's descriptions of the peoples and places she saw during her visits proved compelling to contemporary investigators, very much including Benavides, as well as to the popular imagination then and ever since. We don't have to look far for just one example of Sor Maria's increasing renown as a mystic. By the end of the 1630s, Sor Maria de Agreda had come to the special attention of Philip IV, king of the Spanish monarchia, most likely at first by way of the writings of Benavides. In 1643, Philip IV went so far as to visit the nun in Agreda in person, initiating what became a remarkably extensive correspondence a few months later. His initial letter, in which the king asked the nun to write to him with advice, spoken plainly as to a confessor, and thus not governed by the voices of the world, marks the beginning of a profound kind of relationship. Indeed, a friendship that would span over 20 years and more than 600 letters, lasting until Sor Maria's death in 1665. Sor Maria's story and significance has similarly not been lost on historians and scholars interested in women's history, female mysticism, and the history of the American Southwest. Some prominent examples include a 1967 biography by T.D. Kendrick, Clark Colohan's treatment of Sor Maria's visions in 1994, an updated biography written by Marilyn H. Fedua, published by the University of New Mexico Press in 2010. Sor Maria has been subject of interest for University of New Mexico faculty as well, including John L. Kessel, and most recently, Dr. Anna M. Nogar, whose 2018 Quill and Cross in the Borderlands traces the dissemination and popularity of Sor Maria's writings and influence across the Atlantic and throughout New Spain. In my dissertation project, I seek to contribute to this growing wealth of scholarship. As is perhaps evident by these examples, Sor Maria's story often appears as biography or principally in relation to her mystical bilocations. However, I want to instead position Sor Maria as an integral presence in a transoceanic composite monarchia in contemporary Catholic Christian thought world. I focus on her adherence to and transcendence and sensorial engagement of both the physical boundaries of the convent and Atlantic and the ideological boundaries of gender and early modern theology. For Sor Maria experienced more than bilocations to the American Southwest. She flew through the air, across the earth, and touched the heavenly elements. She witnessed the suffering of souls amidst the subterranean environs of Purgatory. She felt the physical pain of martyrdom, distributed rosaries carried in her pockets, and pressed indigenous bodies toward the baptismal font in the Americas. Sor Maria presented her mystical experiences to others, describing what she had seen, felt, heard, and even tasted. In letters to fellow religious and political figures including King Philip IV, in reported conversations with other nuns, in an array of published and unpublished spiritual writings, in renderings by her hagiographers, in her own autobiographical accounts, and in embroidered textiles representing her miraculous experiences. Sor Maria's engagements with the world and the otherworldly in her early modern moment emerge with uncommon force. By considering Sor Maria's famous bilocations alongside her other mystical experiences, my dissertation moves beyond biography to consider the nun as an entry into a wider world. Her determination to gain all manner of knowledge and her abilities to manipulate, control, reproduce, collapse, and ultimately transcend space and time make Sor Maria a striking access point to this widening landscape. Yearnings which developed in close relation to a burgeoning inner life within her cell and convent. I approach my subject especially through an analysis of its visual and sensorial components, including Sor Maria's bodily and spiritual experiences and her methods of communicating and reproducing for others all that she experienced and how she experienced it. I contend that in ways that built upon and surpassed her famous predecessors, Sor Maria's experiences and her gift for recalling them combined to create her authority, legitimizing a vantage that enabled her to transcend enclosure and, as a woman and mystical intellectual force, to command traditionally masculine spaces. As a female theologian, spiritual and political advisor, convent administrator, renowned mystic, and unconventional missionary, Sor Maria became a more complex and integral figure, one of a number of contemporary women who participated in the entangled projects of Spanish colonization, conversion, and knowledge gathering in the Americas. I investigate the person and legends of Sor Maria de Jesus de Agreda as a revealing interlocutor, traveling alongside her kinds of engagement, following, contextualizing, and analyzing her manner of seeing and moving through what proved to have been surprisingly porous barriers between sacred and earthly, convent and community, old world and new. With Sor Maria as my guide, my research has followed her on her transatlantic journey, requiring visits to archives in both Europe and the United States. I luckily completed the European leg of my journey prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, spending considerable time in archives in both Spain and Italy. I began in Madrid at the National Library, the Royal Library at the Palacio Real, and at nearby El Escorial, a palace monastery located just outside of Madrid. And this is a photo I took at El Escorial on a very rainy and kind of spooky Halloween afternoon from the reading room, the window kind of leading up to where the reading room is located. But here you can kind of get a sense of the really austere and incredible scale of this building. And it's, again, located just a short bus ride from Madrid. I then spent 3 months in Agreda at the Convento de la Concepción. This building was built from 1624 to 1633 under Sor Maria's administration and in response to a need for more space, as both she and the convent itself achieved greater renown, including infrequent royal visits from King Philip IV and other members of the royal family. So this is the more newly built convent, which is still active. It's actually a convent space that is connected to a church. And this is sort of the back of you can see the statue that I had in my earlier slide of Sor Maria. And right next to that is the door to enter the convent. And the three kind of rounded archways further back in the picture is the entryway to the church. So the convent is separated by the church from the church by grills, but they are connected into one building. And as I mentioned, this is about 1.5 blocks away from Sor Maria's childhood home and the site of the original convent. It's sort of located on the outside, the outskirts of of the village near the kind of mountains. While here, I worked in the convent's locutorio. I have a picture of that also. A space for visitors separated from the convent proper by a grill. So this is the room where I conducted most of my research. You can see the grill in the image. There is also a curtain, but that's the space where I conducted most of my research. There's actually two separate locutorios, and this is the one that's more intended for research. There's this table and chair that they put out for me. The other space is more for visitors who want to speak to the nuns. And there were quite a few visitors while I was there, not every day, but lots of people were going in and out and talking to the nuns through the grill at the locutorio. While I was there, I spoke to the convent's abbess, Hermana Vianney Maria, and Hermana Maria Luz, passed archival materials through the grill to me 6 days per week in the morning and afternoon. Some materials like El Libro Gordo, the fat book, pictured here, posed a bit of a challenge, but we managed to make them fit through the grill eventually without damaging the materials. And this slide shows a couple of the materials that I saw. So I wanted to show the picture of El Libro Gordo. There's also an image here you can see where there's that still has the royal seal still intact, and just the handwritten documents in Sor Maria's hand. Most have been collected and bound, and they're very organized. They have a very organized archival system there, and they have many, many materials by Sor Maria, and a lot related to convent administration. That's what the fat book is, mostly convent administration papers bound together. Oh, and you can see it was bound using some musical, a musical score, which is a common thing, reusing old paper, but that's what the binding was. While I was there, I also had the opportunity to venture into the convent itself to get a closer look at some of the material traces left by Sor Maria. So this is important because I had to obtain permission to do research in the convent, but I was still separated by the grill from the convent proper. It is still an enclosed convent. However, after I had been there for several months, I obtained permission to actually go into the convent itself so that I could obtain a closer look at some of these material items that are on display in the convent's museum, which is actually accessible for visitors through the attached church. So again, it's separated from the interior of the convent itself. In the museum, you can look through the grill and a piece of glass into a room that's set up with some of these materials. But I was able to go into the convent proper to have a close look, especially at an altar cloth depicting embroidered images of birds and flowers. So I was able to take some of these photos. The ones on the right, I was able to take. The one on the left is provided by the convent. The one on the right, I was able to take when I was able to go into this room in the convent and to look at this more closely. I was still separated, unfortunately, by one pane of glass, so I couldn't do a full material analysis on the fabric and the backing, but I was able to look at the embroidery itself in more detail. Though I'm still grappling with how to best understand this piece, I suggest that it serves as a visual communication of the great abundance and diversity of the world observed and encountered by Sor Maria as she miraculously experienced the earth, the heavens, and the underworld during her lifetime. We don't know much about this. There's not much in the records, although we do have a name, Live Birds, which is based on a testimony from nuns after her death. So nuns who knew Sor Maria, and they're the ones who suggest that Sor Maria embroidered the image. And it's quite large. It's 3 inches by 7, or 3 feet by 7 feet, from what I could see on display at least. So while we don't know a lot about it, I find this visual depiction very important in thinking about ways that Sor Maria is communicating, not just in writing, but also in embroidery, for example. I concluded my European tour in Rome working at the Vatican Secret Archives and the Archivio de Propaganda Fide in Vatican City, where important testimonies exist collected in the ongoing case for Sor Maria's sainthood. This began shortly after her death in 1655 and continues to this day. And some of these materials from the Propaganda Fide archive are also located in the Center for Southwest Research and Special Collections in photocopy form. I was luckily able to go and see the originals as well. But if you're interested, you can always check out the Propaganda Fide archive and file at the Center for Southwest Research. Speaking of, my work at the Center for Southwest Research has marked the beginning of the American component of my project, deepening my analysis of the peoples and places Sor Maria envisioned and mystically experienced during her lifetime. I have especially benefited from the center's rich collection related to the colonial history of New Mexico, including extensive notes and commentary from both France V. Scholes and John L. Kessel. The Scholes papers include 54 boxes of teaching and research notes, maps, letters, manuscript drafts, and bibliographies related to the colonial history of the Yucatan, Mexico, and New Mexico. For my research purposes, I explored Scholes' work related to Franciscan missionary efforts in 17th century New Mexico, including early Spanish exploration of the area, 17th century maps of the region, and the arrival of Fray Alonso de Benavides. His collection included an extensive index card reference system of secondary and primary sources related to a number of subjects of interest to me, including Benavides, the Humanos, and even Sor Maria herself, as related to the conversion of the Humanos. Research notes for Scholes' eventual publication with H.P. Mera called Some Aspects of the Humano Problem, published in Contributions to American Anthropology and History in 1940, shed important light on the origins of the term humanos to describe the indigenous peoples of the Salinas. Though much of this research dates from the 1940s and 50s, tracing Scholes' process and research gives an in-depth look at how he came to his conclusions. This is especially helpful to me in understanding information circulating during the 17th century about the humanos and surrounding area in New Mexico, considering what reports Sor Maria might have read or heard about in the rural village of Agreda across the ocean sea. Similarly, the John L. Kessel papers include 22 boxes of correspondence, research notes, and copies of both primary and secondary source materials related to his research on the American Southwest. Items of interest to my research concern Kessel's work on the Salinas Pueblo missions, the New Mexican missions more broadly, and Sor Maria herself, which he used in his books Giva, Cross and Crown, and Spain in the Southwest. Kessel's work with the National Park Service resulted in his categorization and summation of important materials related to the Salinas Pueblo area, geographic and topographical details that have substantially enriched my understanding of the landscape witnessed and described by Sor Maria and Benavides. His research on Sor Maria from the 1980s and 90s includes bibliographies and citations for both primary and secondary sources, some of which are included in the file in photocopy. There are also drafted and published essays on Sor Maria that provide clues about Kessel's analysis, all of which have helped me access Sor Maria's legacy in the American Southwest. Beyond these two collections of research and notes, the Center for Southwest Research has a vertical file dedicated to Sor Maria, which includes articles and publications related to the folklore surrounding her appearances at Salinas. The file also includes materials presented to the center by a delegation from Agreda that visited in 2012, including relics of Sor Maria's clothing. This collection has been recently supplemented by the acquisition of a book of 18th century devotional writings by Sor Maria, copied in 1743, and including sections of her most famous work, her biography of the Virgin Mary, entitled Mystica Ciudad de Dios. Though dating from after my time period of interest, this book is a testament to the enduring power and popularity of Sor Maria's works in the New World. At the end of my visit to the center, I had the opportunity to view the Eleanor B. Adams papers, which include several maps of colonial New Mexico of interest for my purposes. These maps, some of which have been digitized by the center's map collection, date from as early as 1583. These critical holdings at the Center for Southwest Research enriched both my dissertation project and imaginative mind as I continue to grapple with Sor Maria's life and legend within the larger context of Spanish colonial expansion and evangelization in the Americas. Yet not all of my work has been in the Anderson Reading Room at the Zimmerman Library. For the site of the Salinas Pueblo missions themselves are integral to my research. Landscapes and spaces that inspired and provoked from across the Atlantic and served as the missionary frontier for Franciscans during the 17th century. These are some photos I took of Gran Quivira, the site managed and founded by Benefides, and one of the reported sites of Sor Maria's bilocations. For this Midwesterner, understanding the New Mexican landscape described so convincingly by my historical subject was essential to my analysis and formulation of my ideas. So here you can see the map, just to kind of orient you if you're not familiar. And these are some pictures that I took of the ruins of the mission site. And here I am in the Church of the Immaculate Conception at Salinas, another site nearby. And I thought this was sort of a fitting image to think about my presence here in the Church of the Immaculate Conception and my work at the Convento de la Concepción in Agreda, and kind of to think about my space on two sides of the world in these kind of religious settings. I want to again thank the archivists and staff at the Center for Southwest Research and Special Collections and the Latin American and Iberian Institute for this amazing opportunity. I look forward to discovering where my project will grow with the help of this incredible experience. Thank you very much.